Maria was not like most women who married rich men. She never cared for glitter, diamonds, or expensive parties. Even before her marriage, she had always believed that real beauty lies in simplicity and kindness. She grew up in a small town, where people knew each other by name and helped each other in times of need. Her parents taught her that dignity is not in wealth but in character. That teaching stayed with her even after her life changed completely. Years ago, Maria's life had been very ordinary. She worked in a little library, surrounded by books and stories. She loved reading about people who faced challenges and became stronger. One day, she met Daniel, a man who came into the library not because he needed a book but because he needed a break from his fast, busy life. He was already a successful businessman then, the kind of man who had more money than he could spend in his lifetime. But what caught his heart that day was not Maria's appearance, which was simple, but her calm smile and the way she treated everyone equally. While many women chased Daniel for his wealth and status, Maria never even knew who he truly was at first. She only saw him as a man who seemed tired and lonely. She offered him a chair, helped him find some books, and spoke to him with warmth. Daniel returned again and again, until the library almost became his second home. Slowly, friendship turned into love, and love turned into marriage. Even after marriage, Maria did not let the luxury change her. She still wore simple cotton dresses, preferred home-cooked meals over hotel dinners, and enjoyed walking in the park rather than traveling to foreign islands. Daniel admired this about her. He often told her that her simplicity reminded him to stay grounded. In fact, he loved introducing her as his wife, because he knew she was different from the glamorous world he lived in. But Maria never liked the attention. When she went out, she never mentioned Daniel's name. People often saw her as just another ordinary woman. She didn't mind. For her, the joy of life was in small things: a cup of tea in the morning, feeding stray cats outside her house, or buying vegetables from the local market. She loved mingling with common people and never wanted to be treated differently just because her husband was rich. One bright afternoon, Maria felt like eating outside instead of at home. She had been busy that morning arranging the house and caring for a neighbor's child. She wore her usual plain dress, tied her hair simply, and carried a small bag. She did not wear jewelry or makeup. For anyone looking at her, she was just another woman going about her day. She walked into a popular restaurant in the city. It was a place known for its fine food, shining lights, and wealthy customers. Maria had heard of it from a friend who said their soup was delicious. She thought to herself, why not try it once? She pushed open the glass door and stepped inside. The restaurant was decorated with bright chandeliers and polished tables. Waiters in uniforms moved quickly from one table to another, serving dishes to people dressed in designer clothes. Maria quietly walked to the counter, waiting for someone to attend to her. At first, no one paid attention. She stood there politely, looking around, until finally, a young waiter approached her. "Can I help you?" he asked, his eyes scanning her simple dress and worn-out shoes. His tone was not rude, but it lacked the warmth he showed to other customers. Maria smiled softly and said, "I would like a table, please. I came for lunch." The waiter hesitated, almost as if unsure whether she belonged there. Still, he pointed to a corner table and asked her to sit. Maria thanked him and sat down, unaware of the whispers happening behind her. Two waitresses at the counter exchanged looks and giggled. One of them whispered, "She doesn't look like someone who can even afford water here." Another added, "Maybe she's lost." Maria could hear them faintly, but she chose to ignore it. She opened the menu with excitement, but her eyes widened at the prices. The food was costly, far more than the simple meals she usually ate. Still, she thought, it's okay. Once in a while is fine. She was about to call the waiter to order a bowl of soup when the manager walked up to her table. The manager, a tall man in a black suit, looked down at her with a forced smile. "Madam," he said politely but firmly, "this restaurant is a fine dining place. Perhaps you'd be more comfortable at a cafe nearby." Maria looked up in surprise. "But I only wanted to have lunch here." "I can pay," she replied softly. The manager's smile disappeared. "It's not about payment, madam. Our guests here come with reservations, and we maintain a certain atmosphere. I'm afraid I'll have to ask you to leave." For a moment, Maria felt her cheeks grow hot. She wasn't angry, but she felt embarrassed. Around her, she noticed a few customers watching with curiosity. Some even smirked. She wanted to explain that she could pay the bill, that money was not the issue, but then she thought, why should she? Did she really need to prove anything to these strangers? She stood up slowly, closed the menu, and said in her calm voice, "It's all right. Thank you." With quiet dignity, she walked out of the restaurant. She did not raise her voice, nor did she argue. To her, it was not worth spoiling her peace of mind. Outside, the sun was shining brightly, but Maria felt a weight in her chest. She had been judged, not for her character, not for her kindness, but for her clothes and appearance. She thought about how often people must face such treatment, people who did not have anyone powerful to stand up for them. She sighed and leaned against the railing near the entrance, wondering where else she could go for a simple lunch. At that moment, she heard the sound of an engine. A sleek black Porsche slowly pulled up in front of the restaurant, its polished body gleaming under the sun. Heads turned instantly. The staff who had ignored Maria just moments ago rushed to the door, eager to greet the new guest. Customers whispered excitedly, recognizing the luxury car. Maria, still standing outside, looked up and felt her heart skip. She knew that car very well. It belonged to Daniel, her husband. He stepped out gracefully, dressed in his usual elegant suit. People gasped as they recognized him, the billionaire whose face often appeared in newspapers and business magazines. Daniel's eyes searched quickly until they found Maria. A smile spread across his face as he walked toward her with love and ease, completely unaware of the storm of judgment that had just taken place inside. The moment Daniel's Porsche came to a stop, the restaurant staff hurried to the entrance, their faces full of excitement. They had no idea that the man stepping out of the car was connected to the very woman they had just sent away. All they saw was a billionaire in a fine suit, someone who looked like he belonged to their world of wealth and glamour. Daniel walked with confidence, but his first glance was not toward the shining restaurant or its staff. His eyes went straight to Maria, who stood outside, holding her small bag in her hands. She looked calm, though inside her heart was heavy. When Daniel reached her, he smiled warmly and kissed her forehead, just as he always did when he saw her after a long day. "Maria, I finished my meeting earlier than expected," he said softly. "I thought of surprising you here. Have you been waiting long?" Maria hesitated for a moment. She did not want to complain or make a scene. But Daniel noticed the sadness in her eyes. He gently held her hand and asked, "What happened?" Before Maria could answer, the manager and the waiters rushed forward. Their earlier arrogance had vanished. They now stood with nervous smiles, bowing slightly to greet Daniel. "Good afternoon, sir," the manager said quickly. "Welcome to our restaurant. It is an honor to have you here. We have the best table ready for you." Daniel glanced at them briefly but did not reply. His focus remained on Maria. "Did something go wrong?" he asked again. Maria gave a small nod and whispered, "They asked me to leave. They said this place wasn't for me." Her voice was calm, not angry, but it was enough for Daniel to understand everything. His jaw tightened slightly, and his eyes grew serious. He turned to look at the staff, who suddenly felt their faces turn pale. Inside the restaurant, guests who had been eating now stared curiously. They recognized Daniel and were shocked to see him standing with the simple woman they had just seen walking out. Whispers filled the air. The manager tried to recover the situation. He bowed again and said, "Sir, it must have been a misunderstanding. Please forgive us. We didn't realize she was with you." Daniel's eyes grew sharper. "So if she were not with me, would she still be unwelcome here?" His voice was calm, but it carried a weight that made everyone freeze. The waiters looked down, unable to answer. The manager stammered, "No, no, sir, that's not what I meant. We have certain standards, you see, and standards." Daniel interrupted, his tone firm but still controlled. "Is your standard to judge a person by the clothes they wear? By the way they look? Tell me, do you think dignity is measured by money alone?" The manager's throat went dry. He wanted to explain, to make excuses, but the words stuck in his mouth. Around them, more guests had stopped eating and were watching. Some looked ashamed, others curious, and a few whispered about how wrong the staff had been. Maria gently touched Daniel's arm. "It's all right," she said softly. "Let's go somewhere else. I don't want to stay here." But Daniel shook his head. He wasn't a man who raised his voice in anger, but he believed in fairness. He looked at the staff again and said clearly, "This woman, the one you judged and asked to leave, is my wife. She is the reason I stand where I am today. Her kindness and wisdom keep me strong. And yet, you decided she wasn't worthy of sitting at one of your tables because she doesn't glitter like your chandeliers. That says more about you than about her." The restaurant grew silent. Even the clinking of glasses stopped. Every word Daniel spoke cut through the air like a truth everyone needed to hear. The manager swallowed hard and tried to smile nervously. "Sir, please, forgive us. We didn't mean to disrespect her." "If we had known," Daniel raised his hand, stopping him. "That's the point. You should not need to know who she is to treat her with respect. Every person who walks through those doors deserves kindness, whether they come in a Porsche or on foot." Maria's eyes filled with quiet pride as she listened. She didn't like attention, but in that moment, she realized why she had always admired Daniel. He never let power or wealth blind him to the value of people. Some of the guests inside started nodding in agreement. One elderly man even stood up and said aloud, "The gentleman is right. Respect should never depend on appearances." His voice carried through the room, and a few others murmured in support. The manager felt the weight of shame pressing on him. He bowed deeply and said, "We are sorry, madam. Please give us another chance." Maria shook her head gently. Her voice was soft, but it was firm. "Respect is not something I beg for. It should come naturally. I don't think I belong here." With that, she turned toward Daniel. He smiled faintly and nodded, offering her his arm. Together, they began walking back toward the Porsche. The staff watched helplessly, knowing they had lost not only a wealthy customer but also their dignity in front of everyone. As Maria and Daniel sat in the car, she sighed. "I didn't want to cause trouble," she whispered. Daniel took her hand and replied, "You didn't. They caused trouble for themselves by showing who they really are. You should never feel small for being yourself. Simplicity is a gift, Maria. It is what makes you different, and that is why I love you." Maria smiled, her sadness melting away. She leaned back in her seat as Daniel started the car. Behind them, the restaurant remained buzzing with whispers and regret. Some people inside promised themselves they would never judge anyone that way again. Others felt guilty for not speaking up sooner. As the Porsche rolled away, Maria looked out of the window at the busy streets. She thought of all the people who were judged daily because of their clothes, their jobs, or their lack of wealth. She silently prayed that one day, the world would learn to value hearts over appearances. For her, the incident was a reminder that even in a world full of money and power, kindness was still rare. And for Daniel, it was another chance to show her that true strength lies in standing up for what is right, no matter how small the situation may seem. Together, they drove toward another restaurant, one less glamorous, but filled with warmth and genuine smiles. As they entered, the staff welcomed them kindly, without judgment, not knowing who they were, but simply seeing them as two people looking for a meal. Maria felt a sense of peace return. This, she thought, was what real respect looked like: simple, honest, and without conditions. The drive from the first restaurant to the second was quiet at first. Maria gazed out of the window, still thinking about the way she had been treated. The city looked busy, with cars rushing by and people walking on the sidewalks, but in her heart, there was a silence that only Daniel seemed to understand. He didn't interrupt her thoughts, letting her breathe and recover from the uncomfortable moment. After a while, Daniel gently broke the silence. "Maria," he said, "I know today hurt you. But I want you to remember something: those people didn't see you. They only saw your clothes. They missed your heart, your spirit, and your worth. That is their loss, not yours." Maria gave him a soft smile. "I know, Daniel. I try not to let these things get to me, but sometimes, it hurts. It makes me wonder if the world will ever change." Daniel reached over and held her hand firmly. "The world changes one person at a time. What matters is that you never change who you are." Those words gave Maria comfort. She squeezed his hand back and let out a small sigh, releasing the last bit of sadness from her chest. Soon, the Porsche stopped outside a small family-run restaurant. It wasn't shining with chandeliers or golden walls, but it had something warmer, a homely feeling. The signboard outside was simple, and the smell of fresh bread and herbs filled the air. Daniel smiled at Maria. "Shall we try this place?" Maria nodded, and together they stepped out of the car. As they walked inside, a cheerful waiter greeted them with a genuine smile. "Good afternoon. Welcome. Please, have a seat." There was no hesitation, no judging glances, only kindness. Maria felt her heart relax instantly. They chose a cozy table by the window. Maria looked around and noticed families eating together, children laughing, and people enjoying their meals without any air of superiority. It felt real, it felt warm, and that was exactly what she needed. The waiter returned with menus and said, "Take your time, and let me know what you'd like." His smile didn't fade, and Maria felt the difference right away. As she opened the menu, Daniel looked at her with gentle eyes. "See? This is the kind of place where respect is given freely. No one cares what you wear. They only care about how you are treated." Maria nodded. "It feels so much better here. I wish people understood that respect is free. It doesn't cost anything." They ordered a simple meal: vegetable soup for Maria and roasted chicken for Daniel. While waiting, Daniel asked her to tell him about her morning. Maria began talking about the little things she had done: the neighbor's child she helped, the flowers she watered, and the book she had been reading. She spoke with such simplicity that even the smallest details sounded beautiful. Daniel listened closely, smiling as she spoke. To him, these little details were treasures. He was a man surrounded by business deals, meetings, and big numbers every day, but when he sat with Maria, he was reminded of the simple joys of life. As their food arrived, Maria noticed something. The family sitting at the next table had ordered extra bread, and when the waiter placed it on the table, the father immediately offered a piece to Maria and Daniel with a friendly smile. "You must try this. It's fresh from the oven." Maria was surprised but touched. She accepted it with gratitude. "Thank you so much," she said. That little gesture of kindness made her heart feel light again. She realized that real wealth wasn't in golden plates or expensive wines, it was in moments like this, where strangers shared food with strangers out of pure goodwill. As they ate, Maria couldn't help but compare the two restaurants. The first one had shiny walls but empty hearts. This one had simple walls but hearts full of warmth. She realized that life was not about places that looked beautiful from the outside, but about places that felt beautiful from the inside. After finishing their meal, Daniel asked for the bill. When the waiter brought it, Daniel smiled and said, "You've been very kind to us." "Thank you." He left a generous tip, not to show off, but because he appreciated the sincerity. The waiter's eyes widened in gratitude. "Sir, thank you so much. Please come back anytime. You and Madam are always welcome here." Maria smiled warmly. "We surely will." As they left the restaurant, Maria felt a new sense of peace. But she also realized something deeper. What happened earlier was not just about her. It was about the countless people who go through such treatment every day, people who are judged unfairly, turned away, or made to feel small. She wanted to do something about it. As they walked back to the car, she turned to Daniel. "You know, I keep thinking, what about the others? People who don't have someone like you to stand up for them. How many must face this kind of judgment silently?" Daniel looked thoughtful. "You're right. Not everyone has someone to protect them. But you, Maria, you have a gift. Your story, your voice, your way of touching hearts, you could make people listen. Maybe you could share this experience, so others can learn." Maria hesitated. "But I'm not someone important like you. Who would listen to me?" Daniel shook his head. "Importance doesn't come from wealth or fame. It comes from truth. And your truth is powerful." Maria stayed quiet for a moment, thinking deeply. She had always been shy, preferring to live in the background. But maybe Daniel was right. Maybe sharing her experiences could help open people's eyes. Later that evening, when they returned home, Maria sat with her diary. She wrote down everything that had happened, the way the staff looked at her, the words of the manager, the whispers of the guests, and the way Daniel stood by her. She wrote about the difference between the two restaurants and how kindness felt more valuable than gold. As she wrote, she realized her story wasn't just about humiliation. It was about strength, dignity, and the lesson that respect should never depend on appearances. Days passed, but Maria didn't forget. With Daniel's encouragement, she decided to share her experience with a small community group she sometimes attended. When she spoke, people listened with full attention. Some nodded, others had tears in their eyes, because many of them had faced the same kind of judgment in different ways. One woman stood up and said, "I work as a maid in big houses, and sometimes people treat me like I don't matter. But hearing your story makes me feel seen." Maria felt a wave of warmth in her heart. She realized Daniel had been right, her voice mattered. She didn't need fame to make an impact. She only needed honesty. From that day, Maria started sharing her thoughts more often. She never gave long speeches, but whenever she spoke, her words touched people deeply. Her story about the restaurant became an example in her community, a reminder that dignity belongs to everyone, no matter how they look, dress, or live. Daniel watched her with pride. To him, Maria was not just his wife. She was a quiet force of change, teaching the world lessons that money could never buy. And though Maria never cared about the spotlight, she carried a new purpose in her heart to remind people, one story at a time, that kindness is the highest form of respect. Word about what happened in that fancy restaurant began to spread slowly. At first, it was just within the community group where Maria had shared her story. But then, one of the members who worked at a local newspaper wrote about it, not mentioning names but describing the lesson behind it. The article spoke about how a woman was turned away because of her simple appearance, and how later her billionaire husband arrived and showed the world what real dignity means. The story touched many readers. Some felt angry at the way she had been treated. Others felt guilty because they realized they too had judged people unfairly at times. Soon, the article was shared on social media, and within days, it reached thousands of people. Maria was surprised when people started recognizing her in small gatherings. Some would come up and say, "Are you the lady from the story? You inspired me." At first, she felt shy and didn't know what to say. She had never wanted attention. But when she looked into their eyes, she saw something deeper: hope. They were grateful because her experience gave them courage to value themselves. Daniel noticed how people were drawn to her. "Maria," he said one evening while they sat in their garden, "this is more than just a story now. People are learning from you. Maybe you should let it grow." Maria shook her head gently. "I don't want to become famous, Daniel. That's not me. But if my story can change even one person's heart, then it's worth sharing." Daniel smiled. "That's all it takes, one person at a time." Soon, Maria was invited to speak at a small local school. The principal had read the article and wanted the children to learn about respect and kindness. Maria hesitated, but Daniel encouraged her. "Just speak the way you always do," he said. "Simple and from the heart." When the day came, Maria stood in front of a classroom filled with children. She looked at their innocent faces, all waiting for her to speak. For a moment, she felt nervous. But then she remembered the little girl inside her who used to stand in the library, reading stories aloud to younger children. She took a deep breath and began. She told them about the restaurant. She explained how people judged her because of her clothes, and how they forgot that respect should be given to every human being. She said, "Never think that someone is less than you because they don't have fancy things. What matters is the kindness in their heart." The children listened quietly, their eyes wide. Some raised their hands and asked questions. One boy asked, "So if someone is poor, should we still treat them the same way as the rich?" Maria smiled warmly. "Yes. Especially then. Because sometimes, those who have the least give the most love." The children clapped when she finished. The principal thanked her and said, "You've planted a seed in these young hearts today. They will remember this." Maria went home that day with a heart full of peace. She realized that sharing her experience was not about her at all. It was about teaching others a truth that the world often forgets. Meanwhile, the restaurant that had turned her away began to face consequences. Customers started questioning their staff. Some even stopped visiting. The management tried to save its reputation by making public apologies, but people were not quick to forget. They realized that no amount of expensive decoration could hide a lack of respect. One afternoon, Maria and Daniel were invited to attend a community dinner where leaders, teachers, and families gathered. The topic of the evening was respect beyond wealth. Maria didn't expect to be asked to speak, but the host insisted. When she stood up, the hall became silent. She looked around and said gently, "I am not a public speaker. I am just a simple woman. But I know one thing: every person here has the power to make someone feel valued or unwanted. A smile, a kind word, or even just listening can change a person's day. And judging someone by their clothes or money can break their heart. So choose wisely which one you give." Her words were not fancy, but they carried weight. People nodded, and some even wiped their eyes. After she sat down, Daniel leaned toward her and whispered, "You just moved an entire room with a few simple words. That's your gift." Maria smiled but stayed humble. To her, she was still just the girl who loved books and tea, not someone who gave speeches. In the weeks that followed, Maria began writing her thoughts more often. Daniel encouraged her to start a small blog, where she shared short stories and reflections about kindness, respect, and dignity. At first, only a few people read them, but soon her words reached a wider audience. Readers left comments saying, "Your story changed the way I see people," or "I will never judge someone by their appearance again." Every time Maria read those messages, she felt grateful. She thought back to that painful moment when the restaurant manager told her to leave. At the time, it had felt humiliating. But now she saw it differently. That moment had become the spark that lit a bigger fire, a fire of awareness and compassion. Daniel often reminded her, sometimes, life gives us painful experiences not to hurt us, but to help others through us. That day in the restaurant was unfair, but look at how much good has come from it. Maria agreed. She realized that life had given her a choice, to stay silent and hide her pain, or to turn it into a lesson for the world. She chose the second. One evening, while sitting with Daniel, she asked him, "Do you think I'm doing enough? Do you think my small words can really change anything?" Daniel took her hand gently. "Maria, never underestimate the power of one voice. Even a candle can light up a dark room. And you, my love, are that candle." Maria looked into his eyes and felt a deep sense of gratitude. She knew Daniel had always been her strength, but she also realized that he saw strength in her that she had never seen in herself. Life continued simply for Maria. She still cooked her meals, cared for her neighbors, and wore her plain dresses. But now, wherever she went, she carried a quiet influence. People saw her not as the billionaire's wife, but as a woman who reminded them of what truly mattered: respect, kindness, and love. And though she never sought attention, attention found her. Not because of wealth or glamour, but because of the light in her words and the purity in her heart. The weeks slowly turned into months, and Maria's story continued to travel further than she ever imagined. At first, it was just her small community and a few schools that invited her. But soon, organizations and even local leaders began reaching out. They wanted her to share her thoughts about kindness and respect. Maria always hesitated, but Daniel kept encouraging her gently. "Just speak the way you speak at home," he told her. "People need your honesty more than perfect words." Maria never saw herself as a leader. She still lived her life the same way: grocery shopping in simple clothes, helping neighbors, and cooking her own meals. But wherever she went, people began to treat her with quiet admiration. Not because she was a billionaire's wife, but because she was the woman who reminded them that respect costs nothing but means everything. One day, Maria was invited to speak at a women's gathering in a nearby town. The hall was filled with women of all backgrounds: teachers, housewives, workers, and students. As Maria stood in front of them, she felt the same nervousness she had always felt before speaking. But when she looked into their faces, she saw not strangers but sisters who carried the same struggles. She began softly, "A while ago, I was asked to leave a restaurant because of how I looked. They thought I didn't belong there. That moment hurt me, but it also taught me something important: that people forget to look at the heart. They only look at the surface." She paused and then added, "But we are not what we wear. We are who we are inside." The women listened in silence, some nodding, some holding back tears. Maria went on, "Many of you may have faced the same kind of judgment in different ways. Maybe someone looked down on you because you didn't have enough money. Maybe someone made you feel small because of your job or your home. But I want you to know your value doesn't come from these things. Your value is in your dignity, your kindness, your courage. No one can take that away from you." By the time she finished, the hall erupted in applause. Some women rushed to her afterward, hugging her and saying, "Thank you. You gave us strength." Maria smiled humbly, her heart full of warmth. She had never wanted to be anyone special, but now she realized that her voice gave others the courage to see themselves differently. Meanwhile, Daniel watched all of this with pride. He had always been respected in the business world for his wealth and intelligence. But now, wherever he went, people spoke of Maria's influence. They said, "Your wife is teaching us more than any book or lecture ever could." And Daniel would always reply with a smile, "That's why she is the most precious part of my life." But Maria never let this praise change her. She always told Daniel, "I'm still the same person. I only share what I feel in my heart." One afternoon, Maria received a letter from a young girl named Aisha. The letter said, "I read about you in the newspaper. I used to feel ashamed because my family is poor, and people laughed at me in school. But after reading your story, I no longer feel small. I know now that I am worthy of respect too. Thank you." As Maria read the letter, tears welled up in her eyes. She realized that her painful experience in the restaurant had been transformed into hope for others. That was when she whispered to Daniel, "Now I understand why that day happened. It wasn't meant to break me. It was meant to teach me, so I could help others." Daniel held her hand and said, "Yes, Maria. Sometimes the hardest moments become the most powerful lessons." Months later, Maria and Daniel happened to drive past the same restaurant where everything had started. Maria looked at the shining building with its glass walls and golden lights. For a moment, memories of that day returned: the whispers, the stares, the cold words of the manager. But this time, she didn't feel pain. Instead, she felt strong. She turned to Daniel and said, "I don't feel hurt anymore. I feel grateful. If that day had not happened, I would not have learned how powerful simplicity is." Daniel smiled, proud of her growth. "That's because you turned your pain into purpose, Maria. And that is something very few people can do." Maria thought for a moment and replied, "Wealth comes and goes. Status rises and falls. But the way we treat people, that stays forever in their memory. I want people to remember me not as a rich man's wife, but as someone who respected everyone equally." Her words stayed with Daniel long after. He often repeated them in his own business meetings. He would tell his partners, "Respect your workers, respect the poor, respect everyone who crosses your path. That is the true wealth." And people admired him even more, not just for his success but for the values he carried, values that came from Maria. Over time, Maria's story became an example often told in schools, community centers, and even workplaces. People shared it to remind themselves and others that appearances can deceive, but kindness never does. And Maria, despite all the attention, remained simple. She still chose plain dresses, still bought vegetables from the local market, and still sat with her neighbors for tea. She believed that true greatness was not about being seen by the world, but about touching lives quietly, one by one. Years later, when people looked back at her life, they didn't just remember the incident at the restaurant. They remembered the lesson she carried from it, that respect is the right of every human being, and dignity does not need wealth to shine. For Maria, what began as a painful moment outside a glamorous restaurant turned into a journey of strength, humility, and love. And for Daniel, it was another reason to cherish the woman who had always been his greatest teacher, his partner, and his heart's peace. Together, they showed the world that while cars, money, and luxury may draw attention, it is simplicity, kindness, and respect that win true honor in the end.